truth is, it's hard to trust at the moment, isn't it? I want you to think about someone you trust. Go deep here. Go with me. What is it that makes you trust them? Perhaps they show a genuine interest in you. They want to know how your day was. They genuinely care about what's been going on with you. Or perhaps that person does what they say they will. They're reliable. They're someone who actually turns up to help you move house when they say they will. I'm trying to move this week. I've not shown up to do any of the packing or any of the work. My husband is doing all of that, so maybe he doesn't trust me anymore. Maybe they just show up consistently. You know they're always going to be there. They maybe give you a ride. You know that at the end of the day, there's someone who is always going to have your back. Most of you probably thought about a friend or a family member. Anyone didn't? Interesting. Okay. So maybe those people that we trust are close to us. Maybe they're related by blood. Maybe we're stuck with them through marriage or a sibling. Someone who's really intimately close with us. Do you trust me? Simple question. You all showed up to hear what I had to say. I guess in-house recruitment trusted me enough to invite me here today, to kick off the day, to be on a headline stage. They don't know me, not a relative. Maybe I'm a friend. Why did they trust me? Maybe it's my CV. I worked for a long time at Booking.com, so I've been in-house. I've been where many of you were, trying to recruit for 17,000 employees in, I think, like 200 offices worldwide. I've also run a consultancy called TheTruthWorks, as Nerida gave me a lovely intro about, for several years as my business partner, Rhiannon. And as she said, we are dedicated to telling the truth and helping organisations confront those uncomfortable truths to move their organisations forward and help them attract the right talent. It could be, but there's loads of great agencies here. There's loads of great consultants in this space. Why trust me? Maybe it's because I put myself out there. Some might say shamelessly. When I got ChatGPT to roast my LinkedIn profile, it said, "You obviously think that people are interested in the story about you falling down the aisle as a bridesmaid at your friend's wedding and how that can really tell you 5 great learnings about employer branding. You clearly think very highly of your opinions." Maybe I do, but I'll always show up authentically for what that word is worth. I will always put myself out there, and I'll always be just a slightly extra version of myself. I will sometimes deal in memes. Sometimes Taylor Swift appears there. I try to be funny. Often I fail. But at least I keep showing up. People know what to expect. They knew what they were getting themselves in for. And maybe some of you did too, if you'd met me or heard of me before. Do you trust me more now? Maybe that I've shared a little bit about myself. Maybe that you know my background, you know my career history. You know that I talk a lot online. Maybe you trust my opinion more. Maybe you showed up just because it was the nearest spot to sit down after you grabbed your coffee. But maybe I've revealed a little bit more and maybe you trust me more. So I want to ask you then, in relation to that first question, do we have to know someone personally in order to trust them? Do we trust these people? Maybe some of you do, maybe some of you don't. But you've formed an opinion of whether or not to trust them. You don't know them personally. I'm assuming most of you don't. How about this guy? Do we trust Stevie? There's some shaking heads over there. Maybe some of you do, maybe some of you don't. But what he has done very well is establish trust with his audience. People trust him enough that when he posts a job for a content editor, not the most amazing salary or amazing opportunities, thousands of people want to go work for him. Why? What is it about Stephen Bartlett? Is it that he shares his successes and failures? He seems like he's showing his true self in his content. He can sell you a patch to put on your arm. This guy is trusted by a lot of people. There are sometimes people online that we trust. Why do we trust them? Why do we buy books off them? Why do we buy the workout gear they sell? Why do we buy the books they cry over on Book Talk? We feel an emotional connection with them because of what they share. How often have you thought, if I met Elizabeth Day, I bet we could be really good friends? We create these connections in our mind and a sense of trust with people who we've never met before. So perhaps we don't have to know someone to be influenced, but we do have to connect with them to build trust. They have to share something of themselves. They have to be human. They have to be relatable. As Charles Green put it, trustworthiness is about credibility times reliability times intimacy, that surprising word that we might not have expected, divided by how much that person seems self-orientated or self-interested. So they have to share something of themselves that's genuinely useful, that genuinely helps other people to build trust. Okay, we're going to put this now in the context of the employer-talent relationship. I hope you all knew I was getting there. So every year, Edelman do a global survey on trust. Other surveys are available. I'm not repping them, but I do think it's interesting because they do it over 25 years. So what you can see is trends in trust, and it's very global as well, which not a lot of surveys are. So they interview 33,000 people in 28 markets on the state of trust across businesses, across NGOs, across media, across government. And what we've seen this year, which I think was really, really interesting, for the first time there is an unprecedented global decline in employer trust. So this is the percentage of employees who say, I trust my employer to do what's right. Now, as employers, that should concern you, because we're becoming an institution that's not to be trusted. And previously, that curve, compared to business, compared to NGOs, compared to media, compared to governments, the business and employer line had actually been relatively stable up till now. The fear that leaders lie to us is at an all-time high. And yes, that is across governments, that is across the media, but actually business leaders are right up there as well, and that mistrust is increasing. This was in response to the question, who believes that employers purposely mislead people by saying things that they know are either untrue or gross exaggerations? How does that sit with us as people who have to persuade people every day to trust us enough with their livelihood, with their employment, which impacts so many things, their mental health, their family life, how well they do in the world, how they get on in life? And it's even worse if you are a minority or someone who fears being discriminated against. This is on the increase. 63% now fear being discriminated against. And it's bad news for our platforms too. We put these messages out in the world on what we perceive to be trusted platforms, on our owned channels, our internal comms channels, our career sites, the social media platforms we have always relied on to disseminate our employment messages. But what if they're not trusted either? We see only 42% trust social media for news and information. That will include information about workplaces. And only 47% trust owned media. That's, for example, your own career website. It doesn't matter if you own that space. We still don't quite believe what you've put on there. So trust is increasingly fragile in an era of political shifts and rapid technological change. Doom and gloom, right? I promise I've got some good news. So I wonder, is AI part of the problem? Is it part of the reason that we are mistrusting? Maybe. There is a difficult dichotomy here, this idea of artificial intelligence, when what we're really trying to create is authentic connection. Can those two things really coexist? Are they going to help each other? We see this race to the bottom. We see more articles about how candidates are lying and cheating their way to game the system, and employers are making the system harder and harder, and they're trying to, block employees from getting access to those opportunities. That's only fueling mistrust, right? Is it just a race to the bottom? Is there nowhere to go from here when it comes to trust between employer and candidate? I want to look at this with a wider global lens, because we can get stuck in our bubble. We can think, okay, well, this is all there is. I guess it's all going to end up in a difficult place. But actually, when it comes to artificial intelligence, if you look at the global stats, the global south Other countries that are not in our Western European viewpoint are actually far less mistrusting of AI. They actually see it as opportunity. They see it as something rich that can create more opportunity, more connection in the world, a platform to change and to grow from. Whereas we have our kind of either US Silicon Valley worldview or our UK-centric or European-centric view. So what are we missing? What are we not seeing that they are? I don't know if anyone uses AI for therapy here. With NHS waiting lists, I wouldn't be surprised. Mental health support has taken a huge leap of people basically skipping the system and saying, I want to get access to trusted advice. Whether or not they should be trusting that advice is another question, but people are trusting their personal thoughts, their intimate problems, their relationship issues, their beef with their mother. They're trusting it to AI. So couldn't we take that trust and create something in the workplace with it? If there's that level of trust with your personal life, why not with your work life too? Imagine that connection being created for talent. That feeling of speaking to someone that actually gets you, that learns about you, that knows you on maybe a deeper level than you might have opened up to a real human. Getting support, which is consistent, ideally legally compliant, on brand, responsive, empathetic. These are all human things that we want, that we don't always get from a therapist, and we don't always get from our employers. So what if we can be more human using AI? What if we can get AI to feel like it shows a genuine interest in me, does what it says it will, and it shows up consistently? All those things at the top of my talk I spoke about being reasons you might choose to trust someone really close to you, like a brother or sister. Maybe AI can do that better than we're doing it at the moment. Maybe if it got to know me and I was applying for a role, it could tell me, you know what, from everything I know about you, you'd actually be a better fit for this role. That creates trust. What if it could say, okay, I know that you're scared and nervous about this interview because you've told me you are. How about doing a trial run? All those great recruitment guides we've created for our recruiters. That's great programming for an AI interviewer to do a dry run. If you look at how an AI bot can roast your profile, want to see it be a mean interviewer, a tough interviewer, and actually give candidates that confidence. Or say, you know what, actually I need you to go easy on me. I need to go into this interview feeling confident. I actually want you to give me an easy run first of all. Big me up, tell me I did great, and then I'm going to go in there and do the real thing. If it knows me, it would know what I wanted to hear more about. It would know that flexibility is important to me because I've told it. And once it knows that, it can say, do you know what, we actually offer much more flexibility at this company than maybe you would have got at your current employer, because it can do the research on a much more human, faster level than we have the power to do as recruiters. We don't have that time. We don't necessarily always have that depth of insight. It could tell me, as an internal candidate, where else I could go from here. The best career coach you ever had, maybe, you know? Or it could maybe give me much more personalised feedback messages. At the moment, we're lucky if we're able to get feedback out to candidates. AI can help us do that, and that all helps create trust. Maybe more timely, more personal, more relevant, in fact, more human than sometimes our recruitment processes can be. Because, let's be honest, we're not always getting it right. And unfortunately, when we get it wrong, this travels. So no shade to this company, this happens. We all make human errors and we're trying to automate, we're playing with automation. But unfortunately, when it goes wrong, it travels. This was on LinkedIn, you know, hundreds of thousands of views. And it loses that trust and that transparency. So we have to get it right. We have to remember there's a human on the end of this process, and that human, once our trust is lost, will not only internalize that mistrust, but they might share it with the world. So how can we use AI to be more human? Here's a lovely example from Buffer. Now, I have no evidence they're using AI. The M-dashes might suggest they are. This could be written by a human. What they've managed to do really well as a remote company is create tailored FAQs in a really human, really open, really vulnerable tone of voice. They're a remote-first business, so it answers questions like, well, how do you know if people aren't happy about something work-related if you can't see them in an office? great, that's an important question. They manage to surface in a really human way some of the benefits, some of the ways that they actually support colleagues remotely without it being copywritten. It feels like a human talking to a human. And it even answers questions like, do you get lonely? Do you get lonely? Now that is a much more human question than I've seen a lot of people asking on their careers site FAQs. But it answers them because it can go deep and it can do this at scale. Okay, great. So I've got AI as a perfect tool. There are tens of companies who will sell you on a tool tomorrow, and I'm sure they all do amazing things. But that is worthless if you do not know how to train that AI and you do not have a deep understanding and connection to who you are as an employer and what you really stand for. So we have to start with being clear on who we are. How do we do that? We build a clear and consistent brand from the inside out. So every client that comes to us at TheTruthWorks for employer branding, we start with the truth triangle. This is a bit of a gut test, measurement test of if they're ready to get started with employer branding. And we go through this process of saying, okay, this is your core identity. You should be able to answer these simple questions and they should tell a connected and cohesive story. This is your truth triangle. You should know the answer to we want to become. Where is this company going? People care about that. It matters to employees. Because we exist to. You don't have to have a purpose, but it helps. We do it by. This is our mission. We show up every day to do this one thing really damn well. But without compromising on these core values that we will not shift from because we believe in them fundamentally. And by committing to, these are the behaviours we all demonstrate every single day and hold ourselves accountable to. To get there, we will. Here's our strategy in a one page. And we will know we're getting there by these core measurable goals. These are not difficult questions, but you'll be surprised how many companies either struggle to answer them or they actually tell different stories depending on which layer you're looking at. Because the reality is they've often created them in isolation. They've had a company come in to do their values and they put some things on the wall. Their vision statement was written years ago. The strategy now no longer actually connects to that. And the behaviours, behaviours were written by HR and they feel very punitive, but they don't necessarily create the risk-taking, for example, or the entrepreneurialism that will get you to that vision. So you have to know who you are. You have to know your core. Then you're ready for branding. Then you can start to live that story. You can start to show up in the world with it. And branding is multidimensional. Do not create your employer brand in a vacuum. There are 3 lenses on your brand generally, and they are how you express yourself in any situation. They should all come from that same root. Your employer branding, why work for us, should be deeply connected to why your customers buy from you and why a corporation would invest in you. Those things tell a connected, cohesive story, and they should feel part of a core identity. Because the reality is, trust is how you show up consistently with those things every single day. And it's not built in a one-off post or campaign. How many of you have pitched an employer branding project only to have it finished, you've made a video, done? That's not how it works. I drive people crazy. Every Black Friday I post this, so if you follow me, apologies. Running recruitment ads once a year during your hiring peak and doing no employer brand building the rest of the year is basically the equivalent of running a Black Friday sale when no one knows anything about your brand or your product. Flash sale on, guys! Come and join us. Well, who are you? What do you stand for? What do you do? I've never heard of you, so I don't care that you're hiring. Same as running a sale when no demand has been created in the run-up to that sale. And what happens if you know your core, but you choose to show up in a different way? We like to say at TheTruthWorks, there is no internal, external anymore, and that freaks out internal comms professionals. I do not mean you do not have a job. What I mean is that regardless of what channel you're posting your sanitized messages on that you are comfortable putting out into the world, your employees can put out anything they want, and actually the realities are everyone can see inside your organization pretty transparently these days. So, say you have a real focus on women in leadership, but your pay gap says otherwise. Many of you may have fallen foul of the gender pay gap bot. Who didn't see this? Anyone? Well, this was fantastic if you did. This was two women who basically used Twitter, as it then was, now X, to call out any company posting on International Women's Day by scraping their gender pay gap data and saying, this company has a 55% gender pay gap. Hastily, companies took down their International Women's Day posts because you cannot afford to try for transparency and have it blow up in your face. You have to actually practice what you preach. Maybe you talk very confidently about being a fast-growing rocket ship along with everyone else. The layoffs you just made tell a different story. If that's all you're hanging your truth on, you will run out of steam quite quickly. You say you care about people as individuals, but you have a 5-day RTO mandate. So individual. We all know what happens when we say we're a family, but we're actually a business. If we use our internal comms channels to disseminate information, we have to also take the risk that our Leave Pity City message to employees will be disseminated on YouTube the next day. We have to think of our internal comms channels as a reflection of our employer brand too. How do we show up for colleagues? That is how colleagues will interpret how we show up for everyone else externally as well. And of course, whistleblowing is on the rise. You may not get your best-selling novel from one of your employees, but they will be sharing about you on Reddit. When you are consistent, when you know your core, you know who you're for, and you also know who you're not for. And that's fine too. We cannot be everything to everyone. It is not possible, and it is not realistic. Perhaps you don't want to work at Anduril. Who saw this campaign? Anduril, for those who didn't see it, is a defense company in the US. To work there, you have to be patriotic, and you have to be able to carry heavy machines. You don't like flexibility, and you are not a snowflake. In fact, it is hard work, on hard problems, on hard mode. And if this isn't for you, then Anduril isn't the place for you. But if you're ready to transform US military capabilities with advanced tech, we want to hear from you. I personally don't want to work there. I think they probably have a diversity and inclusion problem. However, you would know exactly what you were getting into. It's not dishonest. And telling that truth builds trust with your audience, that big word we started off with at the beginning. Because the reality is sometimes it's good working at your organization, and sometimes it's shit. So it's important to be equally well-versed, especially as recruitment professionals, in both the strengths and the weaknesses of your company. We think we need to give recruiters a guide to all the top 5 sales pitches about our company. But actually, it's equally important to know where you're not so great. To be able to tell a candidate, look, if you're looking for flexibility, it's not us. People are really direct here, and that might not be a style of communication that you like working with. That's okay. Maybe you're not for us. It's really important to know that. Know who you aren't. If you are struggling to articulate what it's really like working here, ask your employees. We don't do that enough. Actually use their words and really listen for those sound bites. If I was the employer brand manager at SpaceX, I might have been relieved when an employee described what is probably an indescribable culture as insanely intense magic. It's honest. Kind of gives you a sense of the dichotomy, the chaos, the brilliance, but also the sort of trauma you might engender working there. So don't dodge the hard truths. Address them head on. I have a company that I work with that's a big dairy company. And one of the things they did brilliantly, this was their idea, not mine, but I highly applauded it and it was really effective for them. They would constantly have employees saying, well, employees go to barbecues at the weekend. And everyone says to them, oh, the dairy industry is awful, you guys are doing awful things. Which is true to an extent. But what they did was offer their employees a counter-narrative. They said, look, you're going to get these questions, but you all chose to work here for a reason. So if you are put in these uncomfortable positions, here are some other things we are actually doing to combat those stereotypes. Here are some ways that you could answer your friends that you might want to use, you might not, but we don't want to send you out into the world ill-equipped to answer those difficult questions about working for a company that obviously has this reputation. They led into it, they owned it, and they equipped their employee ambassadors and their employees in general to stand up for the company they were proud to work for. Building trust can also mean having fun with reality. I wanted to show you a video here, but I don't think the sound will allow. But I really want you to take as a piece of homework. I want you to realise that being honest doesn't always have to be dry and boring. If you have not watched the InStyle series, The Intern, I highly, highly recommend it. They're actually on their 4th series. They are calling it a scripted reality drama. So if any of you have grown up on like Love Island, they have basically completely leaned into the idea that you can blend reality and hyperbole in this beautiful, fun, charming way. So it features their real CEO, and the actual headline is Actual CEO on the subtitles that come up. She has fun with it. And then they've hired interns who are actually influencers in the public space to be the biggest nightmare interns in the world. And what they've created is something that's charming, it's funny, it's watchable. They're on 4 seasons. People actually look forward to this content. But it's authentic to them, and it's grounded in truth of what the day-to-day reality of working at the magazine is like. But they play with it. So what is our personal role in building trust in our employer brand as ambassadors for it? The reality is talent will trust individuals, not platforms. There is a huge employee advantage, and that includes a lot of you. According to the same trust barometer, most people trust a regular employee at 54% more than they trust a CEO. Now that might be unsurprising when you consider that apparently they also think that leaders lie to them. So as employees, you are a trusted voice. You are someone that has power and has influence. Maybe at Stephen Bartlett levels, you never know. So I want to leave you with these 4 things. I want to leave you with the idea that trust has to be earned. It is not something you get to do on a flash sale Black Friday. You have to earn it over time by showing up consistently. You can use AI to be more human, but only if you know who you are in the first place. The truth is always your best bet, but gosh, you can have fun with it as well. You can play with it. You can lean into it. And as employees, you have the greatest influence over building that trust and connection. We trust people we have that intimate relationship with. You have the power to show yourselves and then tell people what you think of your company. If you want to hear more, or if you would like me to roast your employer brand, I will happily do so. You will always get honesty from me. We're also about to drop something huge, which is a completely different way that companies can interact with employer brand experts. So I definitely recommend following us. You can follow us on all the usual channels that are untrustworthy, and you can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I've been Emily Firth, and I would love to take your questions if we have time.